Hello, viewers. Welcome to Take to the Street, where I, Nitron Street Rider, will thoroughly analyze known animated characters from the Splatoon SFM community and break down their appearance, personality traits, a timeline of events based on their screen time and actions in the series, and power sets and skills. Today, we start with well-known Splatoon content creator MAEKA ENDERFOX, and her main antagonist for a few series now, probably the baddest mom in any Splatoon animated series, Yuma. Yuma is the cruel, cunning, abusive leader of the Cyborg Octoling Killer Clan, a group of cybernetic octolings feared by many for their terroristic tendencies and tactics, as well as their discriminatory feelings towards the Inkling race. Yuma herself is perhaps the most cunning and evil of them all, her being the leader and executioner. So what made this cunning, sadistic, and cruel octoling tick in the hearts of so many? I suppose we should start from the very beginning. Yuma appears to be a tall octoling, but because of the model used, it is not certain what her height is. She has waist-length crimson hair and red octopus eyes with green sclera. She typically wears a pair of red Octarian distributed hypnotechnology sunglasses that sit jauntily over her right bang. She normally carries a katana in either her belt or in her hand. Her outfits have varied throughout the various series in which she's appeared in. In her debut appearance, to Octolings, she is seen sporting the typical Octarian-style uniform, a crop-top leather short sleeve with a metal ring encircling it, and two belts at her hips, and a pair of Octarian-distributed leather boots and metal soles. In the Escape series, she dons a black hiking coat with a high collar, and it was this series that we saw her weaponling cyborg form. This version of Yuma swaps her hair from straight red to black hair with a red gradient, and a singular red reptilian eye next to her usual Octarian red eye. Red LEDs sit on her eyeliner, and similar lights run all the way down her torso and across her arms and legs. At her backside is a cybernetic tail outfitted with what seems to be a powerful laser blaster. These same two appearances are used in the series Save the Demon, but it's during the Perfect Control series where it really gets weird. In that series, Yuma keeps her cyborg appearance, although the Octarian armor is back, adding some pretty morbid decorations to hint at her mind degrading to a more savage nature. These are the skull necklace she wears, the skull at her hips, and the haggard-looking wrench at the back of her belt. A sort of claw now covers her left eye, turned a bloodshot red instead of the typical Octarian eye. The same claw could be seen on her back, meaning to act as rib cage armor. Her final form sees her eyes go completely black and red, and her hair grows longer and thicker. She goes full-on cyber demon in her appearance, with cybernetic claws over her normal fingers and over her jaw, and her tail grows longer and much thicker. Her hair turns a vivid maroon to tip off the appearance, altogether selling an image of menace and an imposing stature. Yuma belongs to a species of octoling that has been extinct for a long time. There are still some in the world, but it's rare to find them. She was abandoned by her masters or her parents, who are to this day unknown. She lived most of her life alone, bearing the torment of the Inklings, who still didn't know about how octolings were essentially the same but from a different species. She hated having to repeat hearing the difference between her species and others. They were discriminatory to her, so she'd be discriminatory back. She'd train alone for hours and hours with a knife that she found, imagining over and over the forms of her enemies falling before her. And it was during this training that she met one of her own kind at last, who bore the same hatred and had a lot of the same interests. That octoling was Hisoka. Hisoka also had a hatred for Inklings. He also trained in the same place as Yuma when she was away, and he always was hiding a few steps away, watching Yuma practice every day. One day, Yuma noticed Hisoka and fell in love with him, and ever since then, they've trained together and never left. Eventually, the two wed in a private ceremony. As their relationship deepened, they decided to finally let the Inklings know how much they really hated them, and began crafting robots, mainly cyborg Octolings, and sicking them on Inklings out in the streets. Thus, the clan was formed, and Yuma and Hisoka crowned themselves the leaders and executioners. Later in the series, the clan was spotted again, while the main character, MAEKA, was making a clone of herself upon seeing more Octolings in the plaza. This would later turn out to be Mutsuki, whose relevance wouldn't exactly be significant in Yuma's story. MAEKA, on the other hand, began to interest Yuma after her only daughter and ultimate project, going under the name of Tori, befriended her after she ran off. After Hisoka, now her husband, was informed of her daughter's escape, I imagine that Yuma was informed of this by him before he pursued her. After the fight and the first unleashing of the demon Arima upon the clan, Yuma became at the same time very angry and very interested. How can an Inkling like her harbor something so dangerous? She decided to investigate further. She'd go after that demon and avenge Hisoka's death and punish Tori even if it killed her. Ironic, considering she couldn't die. During part 4 of Two Octolings, Strange Mother, Yuma displayed just how deeply her hatred cut, and just how cruel she could be to her underlings, even to her own daughter. After shutting her down and trying to trigger the demon's release, she went straight at MAEKA's vitals, and that was the kicker that triggered Arima's anger. I leave you to judge what happens next. With Yuma's second iteration, she was more determined than ever to lay hands on that demon and find out where it came from and what power it had. So, using her cunning criminal mind, she arranged the kidnapping and hypnotizing of the head of Inkopolis Police Department, nicknamed Super Cop. Then, she arranged for MAEKA to become the department's most wanted fugitive, highlighting Arima's onslaughts on innocents. This plan succeeded beyond her wildest dreams, and MAEKA was arrested and brought to prison until further notice. After a while, she is then brought to a room where Yuma intended to extract Arima's blood for a sample. However, Yuma misjudged just how tenacious and aggressive Arima can be, and soon enough she had broken free of her bonds and beat up the soldiers ruthlessly. Yuma and Hisoka chose to fight and kill it off, but to their no small surprise, Tori rushed in and protected the monster, knowing that her best friend was still in there. Yuma laughed at and chastised Tori for being naive. Tori quickly proved them wrong, showing just how strong she had become in her training with MAEKA, and it was then that Yuma made the revelation that the clan was pretty much immortal, even if their bodies were finished off. Tori then, in shock, blasted Yuma and knocked her out once again, and that was all she wrote for this arc. Yuma's third appearance was in the crossover video with content creator Ranger Bismuth and his OC, who has a canon crush on Tori, and she for him. The story arc starts with Tori and Ranger meeting up, and MAEKA popping up and acting as the third wheel. However, these plans would not go as anticipated, as Yuma and her forces come in and manage to capture MAEKA again during the night. Lucky that she had her GPS on her, and Tori was able to track MAEKA to the clan's next base. Yuma, on the other hand, had chained up, gagged, and blindfolded the poor green Inkling, and it was then that Yuma and Hisoka decided to torture and interrogate her. When MAEKA wouldn't answer about Arima or her powers, Hisoka would press a button that emitted high-frequency sound waves that disoriented MAEKA and infuriated Arima, causing her to bang her head on the table and try to break her bonds. Eventually, this works, and Arima goes on the rampage throughout the base. However, she was gravely injured when Yuma found her, and after a standoff, she sliced through 3 of Arima's 4 tails, causing her immense pain. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to the clan, Tori and Ranger were snooping around the base, trying to find their friend. Eventually they do so, but not in the form that they wanted to see, for Arima was sitting right in the middle of the hallway. It would have gone ill for them had Arima noticed them, but a sharp blaring was heard from the loudspeakers around the base, and Arima was forced to retreat deeper. Yuma would then confront the demon and try to finish it off once and for all, but Ranger interfered. Arima took this time to try and attack. Unknown to her, that inside MAEKA, a tense battle between Arima and her angel Raita was being waged. It was now or never for Yuma then, but the demon hadn't backed down yet. It still possessed the girl, and Yuma misjudged yet again the savagery Arima could deploy. For as the demon used her dark energy, she was thrown into the nearby blender, and her body was shredded. It seemed like that would have been the end, and the heroes retreated home. But even then, Yuma still had life left in her for one more battle, as she glared out from the blender in a liquefied state. Yuma's last endeavor was probably her most cruel and savage yet. Clearly her run in the blender had knocked a few screws loose, and she was out for blood, this time more than ever. Catching MAEKA in the middle of a super jump, and shutting off Tori so that no one could find her and free her, she planned to dissect MAEKA alive, and tear the demon out from her very soul. In an odd twist of events, something rather unexpected happened. The Zapfish Zappy, whom Yuma had confiscated from MAEKA, managed to escape its pod and find a way to get MAEKA's phone back and call Tori. However, this didn't go past Yuma for very long, as it was time for the green maggot's dissection. Little did Yuma know that MAEKA had managed to control Arima for a brief space of time with Raita's help. As soon as she opened that cell, MAEKA in the demon's body ran frenziedly for the exit, Yuma shrieking like some wild banshee after her. She didn't get far, as she was struck down by a masterful spear throw by one of the minions. Hisoka was about to finish it off for good when something stabbed him and he stood stock still. He had been defeated by a mere stranger, and when Yuma found out that Hisoka had been deactivated and shut down for good, that set her mad, and she pulled out her final form. Tori ended up showing up then, and she was the guinea pig of final form Yuma's wrath, stabbing her and pinning her to the wall. She was about to put an end to her miserable failure of a daughter when that pestilential demon got in the way again. Ink walls surrounded her. Yuma scoffed it off as another demonic trick, and tried to force the demon to come out. It turns out she did, but it was more so a hybrid between her and MAEKA. Yuma lunged and attacked her with all her strength. After the demon retreated again, she went on to monologue to Tori about why she did this and how miserable and bothersome she originally thought her. The promise she saw for her when Arima decided to attack again. Yuma was ready for it, piercing the hand through and through, but it had little effect. She was snared by the ginormous Giga Arima. Her minions lunged at the demon to try and save her, but all to no avail. They were all destroyed by the immense power which Arima had in her ginormous form. She was slammed into the ground, and as she looked around, she noticed how much her minions were struggling, noting that her world was finally coming crashing down. It was Arima's turn to monologue, highlighting the weaknesses of the clan and the end to her once proud dreams of domination and a machine-led future. All of this before she ramped up the pain, constricting her with her inky hand, finally squeezing her so much that she blew up in front of all the minions. When her own mechanical eye was seized by the demon girl and eventually eaten, and at that the whole clan stood inert and motionless in the positions that they were currently in. It was over. The heroes had won. Or had they? No, they totally won. Yuma was finished. They were free. Yuma is shown to be quite skillful with the sword and dagger, even though she is technically self-taught. She's also shown to have a good deal of endurance, as she can fight for long periods at a time, even when under pressure from outside forces like demonic influence. For a long time, her technology allowed her to remain alive and intact, and that was due to, in part, the mechanical beholder's eye that was placed in her systems, allowing her total control of her minions and drones, so she is shown to have some degree of technokinesis. Furthermore, her weaponry consisted of typical firearms and mounted laser cannons, and later on, some degrees of energy manipulation. However, not much was seen of her further powers because of how quickly Arima was able to dispatch her every single time. Yuma is seen in a few other small cameos in comics, and even in other videos. In, for instance, content creator Crazy Crafter's series, Agents of Strike, Yuma was the correspondent and ally of Black Army Commander Lyra, who described Yuma as an old friend, so it could be that these two war-bent women had been conspiring for some time. However, Yuma defied Lyra's orders, using an EMP blast to stun Tori and another Inkling girl, sniping MAEKA and capturing her once again. Her typical cold tactics are shown in full force once again, but not much else is seen of her up until Hisoka shot down the Strike Blackhawk full of the freed prisoners. Other cameos are seen in Razor Bismuth comic series, Lovebirds, and others. And that's all she wrote about Yuma for now. Hopefully, with her system shut down, we won't have to worry about her for some time. However, there are still other villains out there for us to unravel and explore. So until next time, stay out of the streets at night, because you never know who might be out there.
Most intriguing. With the clone out of the way, I'll have free reign to cause as much chaos as I want. But those weird forms could prove advantageous to me. So while the clan may have fallen, the Empire is only just rising.